Hello YouTube. So I'm getting ready to install the BL touch sensor on my i3 Plus printers. But first things first. On my Maker Select here, my Monoprice Maker Select 3 Plus, I need to repair the bed temperature sensor of the thermistor. I'll see if we can get it to do it again here. I just tried preheating it and I got a warning. I got a, what's it called? A thermal protection warning from the new firmware that I've installed, so that's nice. And also, see if we can get a nice shot here. And now it actually did it again. So we just focus on that. So we see there are inconsistency with the printed temperature, minimum bed temperature exceeded, yada yada yada. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to disable the thermal protection just to show you what the problem exactly is, because it's slightly intermittent. Well, it's not really intermittent, but it will be there for a few seconds, then it will be fine for a few seconds, then it will, oh sorry, I bumped the camera, then it will be back, and yeah, it's a big hassle. So when I've been using this printer, I've been using it with the heated bed turned off for now, but it's time to fix it before I install the BL touch sensor, otherwise it's kind of pointless. So what I'm going to do now is I've disabled the thermal protection. Then I'm going to start a print. There's not actually any filament loaded, but yeah, that's not really important because the problem really shows up when the bed is moving. That's where you can see it. And now on this new firmware we have a nice graph down here, so we should see that sometimes it reports 0 as the temperature and sometimes it's reporting something else. You can already see it now as it's preheating actually, but it gets really weird when the bed is moving back and forward and the whole printer is shaking, which leads me to believe that the problem is a bad connection. It could be a bad solder joint, or maybe one of the legs on the thermistor is broken or something. We're gonna have a look at that. So I'm just gonna try getting this started so we can really see what's happening on the screen down there on the graph. So I'll be back when this is done preheating. Well, I didn't really have to wait for it to completely preheat and start the print. I think if you see the blue graph down there, that's the bed, and yeah, it's pretty obvious what's happening. It's just losing connection apparently to the thermistor sometimes. Then the temperature drops to 0 and then it comes back. And when it's printing, that will happen pretty much all the time. So you never really know what temperature the bed is actually at. And now I just want to mention this. You wouldn't have this on the stock firmware, this graph. Usually you would have to use Octoprint or something to get a graph like that. I have this because I just installed a custom firmware called ADV i3++. You can look at my previous video to see how to install that. And we do a little walkthrough of what's going on. In the next video I'll be installing a BL touch sensor. If not in this printer, then in my Wanhao. If we can't get the bed temperature fixed. Yeah, let me just rearrange some stuff so we can get this apart and then have a look at what the actual problem is. So to get to the electronics and the base, we need to, well, first of all, disconnect the power, make sure nothing is charged. And we need to remove the tower here, the tower construction from the base to get to the electronics down there. So first of all, we need to disconnect all our wires here. So everything that's going to steppers, we have a limit switch here, got a connector over here, another stepper. I think that should be it, and remove the SD card. Okay, so we then have, I think it's just 4 screws. Let's see if I can get in here with this. Hope so. There we go. So there's 2 screws on each side, one there and one down here by the stepper. And 2 more on this side. There we go. And now I should be able to slide the tower off. It's important you slide it forward, otherwise you'll the cables will interfere, so you won't be able to get it off. And then we just need to lift this slightly. And it can be a little tight, but just slowly push it through like so. And now the tower is disconnected, and we have the base here. It just has the bed. All the steppers are disconnected except the one controlling the bed, of course. And on the bottom we have a big plate which we can unscrew with all these screws here. And then we can get into, we can see already the power supply here. We'll have the main board up here. We have the stepper for the bed back here. And then we can get to the electronics and do whatever we need. Okay, so now that we have it apart, the first thing I want to do is have a look under the bed. That's where the thermistor is located. So, and we'll have a look inside at where it connects to the main board as well afterwards, because I have actually had this apart before, and I saw there was some maybe cracked solder joints there that I want to reflow at the very least, just to make sure. But first we'll have a look at the actual thermistor, since I've never done that on this machine. And that's a very simple operation. You just have to remove all these thumb screws completely. Just be careful they don't drop down into the machine. There's the slot where the bed is driven by the stepper, and they can actually, yeah, we can maybe see it down here. They can actually drop in there. So just be careful they don't do that. But otherwise, getting it apart is easy. Putting it back together though, that can be a bit more tricky in my experience, to get all the springs and stuff to line up. But yeah, let's get it apart. And you can also see I have made a slight modification to this. Just zoom in a little bit. You see I have printed some small cups that keeps the spring in place. Otherwise the bed has a tendency to want to wobble a little bit on this. With this design, they help a little bit in that regards. So let's just get the last screw over here. There we go. Now turn it around, because now we should be able to lift this up and actually flip it over. Let's just move this way. We can pull this cable up through the slot in the carriage and flip over the bed. And then we have the thermistor right here. I'll just zoom in on that. And it's actually just kept on there with Kapton tape. It sits in here. So what could be the problem right here is these joints here. It's just a thermistor with its legs. There's some heat shrink sleeving on there on the legs, and then it's just spliced onto a wire. So let's try and see if we can get this tape off. I do have some replacement tape, not this wide, but I'll just use several strips. So we'll just, I don't care if I destroy it. I have a replacement. Oh, and yeah, I think we've found the problem already. That came right off. It's supposed to be spliced in here, inside the heat shrink. And it actually just came right off. So those, you can see a tiny bit of solder on there. Maybe, if I can get focus on the ends of the legs there, you might be able to see a tiny, tiny blob of solder. But that solder joint in there has cracked. So I think I found my problem. Now it's just a matter of seeing if we can. Yeah, I kind of want to keep these sleeves here. I do have some new heat shrink if I need it, but these sleeves for the legs, they're cut out so nicely, so I kind of want to keep those. And that's just to keep the legs from touching each other, and so that it doesn't short circuit. So yeah. And let's see if we can get this heat shrinking off. I might have to cut this cable. No, that pulled right off. Nice. So there we have the wire ends. And let's just see if we can get a close-up of that. It's really hard to get a good shot. It's so small. But these right here, there we go. This is supposed to be spliced on here, but those joints has cracked. What I might do, I have some like crimp. Well, I have some crimp thingies to splice wires together. But the problem is, I think the ones I have are probably way too big for this application. But I could put one of those in there, or a couple of those in there, maybe to make this more resilient. Because it just seems like, yeah. Or maybe they just didn't do a good enough job on this. Either way, we'll need to get the solder out, and I'll need to resplice those wires, and then maybe put a crimp over them. And some heat shrink, and then it will probably work. But we'll have a look inside the on the control board as well, because like I said, I've looked at that before, and it kind of looked like there might be a crack in one of the solder joints that connects the probe. So yeah, we'll have a look at that. But I'll get the soldering iron heating up and find what I need, and then we'll fix this. Okay, so I think I have what I need here. We've got the thermistor that came off, and the little legs for that, which are here. Just reattach this one. Then let's see if we can get this to stay there. Okay. We've got some heat shrinking. I cut a few pieces. Let's see if I can find those. They just disappeared. I got some solder. I got the soldering iron over there. Tip cleaner for the soldering iron. I was just trying to do this and I wasn't recording, but that's okay because I didn't succeed at all. This is some tiny stuff, and doing it with the camera in front. Oh yeah, I've cut the heat shrinking and they're already on the wires here, which you can hopefully somewhat see. Just move that into the center of the shot. So the blue and the white here, that's heat shrinking. And now I've got to see if I can get a connection of these tiny things onto these wires here. And that's, I was just trying to do it from behind the camera and I'm shaking a lot. I have some tiny bit of tin here on here. The problem is, okay, so I've managed it in the end. Let's just see if we can zoom in here. I've covered up the work underneath with heat shrink because it looks really ugly, and I'm glad I didn't get it on camera. But what I did in the end was I actually taped down the thermistor to the bed. You see there's a few minor marks from my soldering iron, and then as it lay flat I could then adjust the cables and get those in there and then solder them onto the thermistor instead of the other way around as I was trying to do before, and that just didn't work. And then I just also discovered there's this hole that's supposed to sit in. Honestly, I kind of think this cable might actually be too short. It's just barely able to reach into that hole. But we're going to try and Captain tape it down. Then I'm going to test it. We're still going to have a look inside as well, but I'm just going to test it because I've been messing around with that thermistor for a long time, and you can actually burn them out when you're coming in with something as hot as a soldering iron. So I want to see if it actually still works or if I need to get a new one. Let's just see if I can find my, whoops, sorry. I'll just find my Captain tape. I had it like 20 seconds ago. Okay, so it's back on there, lots of tape. First we want to remount the bed here. Let's see if we can do that without dropping all the springs and stuff. This is the tricky part. Hopefully I can do this. And I'll just have a look in here to see if there's some of this there. Yeah, it stayed in place. So, I don't really need to screw it down. We're not going to level it right now, but still, if it works, I won't need to have this off again. So I'll just want to test that I didn't burn out that thermistor. So I want to power it up and see if we're getting readings that are sensible, or if I just screwed it up entirely with my soldering that took forever, because yeah, I had a lot of issues with that. And this last one is giving me trouble. I think I was turning it the wrong way. There we go. So we reconnect it. We're not going to reattach the tower. We're just going to add power and see what kind of temperature readings we're going to get. So, what way around are you guys supposed to go? Like so. So we move it back there. And it's saying I'll just move you down a bit so we can get an angle on that. But right now it's saying it's about 23 degrees in here, and I'm sitting right next to a radiator, so that might be, it's probably not far off. Now the hot end of course is saying minus 15, and that's of course because the hot end is not actually connected. Just check that the thermal protection is off, otherwise I probably can't test it right now. So let's see, can we, let's just preheat 60, extruder 1 heating. It should heat the bed first, right? Here, so I can't do that way. When I'm printing, it heats the, I mean, when I'm printing, it heats, yeah, it heats the bed now. So let's see if we get any drops. I can just try moving this back and forth to see. We should have the full travel. Didn't snag the cable on anything. We're not getting any drops on the graph down there. So now what, I'm just gonna let it sit, and we're not getting any drops of any kinds. Even if I move it back and I bang it, like when I did this before, I would, if I moved the bed and stuff, I would get a lot of those drops on that graph down there, and yeah, it definitely seems to be fixed. So I'll just shut it off here, let it cool a little bit, and then we'll have a look at the PCB inside. Okay, so it's fairly cool. Couldn't find a temperature probe or anything right now, but well, it did stop heating, so I'm thinking probably alright, even if it's a little bit hot. One thing I just want to do before we go inside is remember to turn on the thermal protection again. That's rather important, so I'll just do that so we don't forget. There we go. Then let's have a look inside. Now, to get inside, we need to remove the bottom plate, and I need a smaller bit. Oh, it's too small. That's about right. I think we are supposed to remove all 6 screws, but I might be loosening something inside. We'll see. And the last one. And this should just lift off. There we go. That's just a piece of sheet metal. And then we have the PCB over here. You can better see it from this. And let's see, where is hotbed, power in, CC, where is these white wires. So B-temp, that's this one here. So the white wires going in there. And what I want to do is to get on the other side of the board, because I think there is some suspect solder joints in there. So what we need to do is first of all disconnect the ribbon cable. over here. It goes to the LCD. And then there's 4 screws, it looks like. Is that the same size? It is. And it's got some small washers as well to insulate it from the case, apparently. And the last one is hidden behind the ribbon cable. There we go. Now I should be able to lift this out if there isn't any hidden screws I can't see. So we lift that out. And then the bed temperature sensor is these solder joints. And let's just inspect those. I'll get a flashlight. Okay. So yeah, I don't know. They actually look fine. It might have been some other solder joints done. As far as I can tell, they look fine. You'll have trouble seeing that, but it's these two I'm just looking at. Well, let's just freshen them up a little bit. Give them a dab of fresh solder just to make sure. Let's see if we can get this to stay in a position where I'll be able to work on it somewhat. So I'll just freshen up these solder joints, just because I think I saw something, well, maybe it actually is the power connector here. That looks a little bit dinged at least. I'll freshen up a couple of these solder joints, and then this should be back in operation. And then I'm ready to install the BL touch sensor. And while we're in here, I can just show you where that goes. We've got this EXT 10-pin connector here that's unpopulated. And as far as I remember, we use those pins to connect the BL touch sensor. So that will be in the next video. So yeah, if you want to see that, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to see more about the firmware I'm running on this, you can see my previous video. And otherwise, until next time, take care.